victories that you achieve are yours alone. And if you decide to make that a larger issue, if you decide to get a bunch of packs together and forge an alliance to work together over some larger issue, that's a victory that you can claim for yourself as well. So this gives the players the impetus to be the ones who are deciding the fate of their world and the victories of their packs.
Right.
All right. Who's got
one thing that was lost, I'll admit, if I can just elaborate a little further, that I feel I have mixed feelings about, is the feeling of belonging to something large to you via the tribe and the ethnic ties that were present before, because it had its good side and its bad side. The good side that I miss about it was that people would go to a werewolf book, look it up, and say, "Oh, hey, I'm probably a member. I would probably be a member of this tribe." You have that immediate. If you can, remember where your ancestors were from, you might have an immediate connection to one of those tribes. But that was also a problem because you could run into ethnic stereotyping, which got frankly embarrassing in some cases. You ran into problems where someone would say, "Well, I would like to be one of the Black Furies because I'm totally of Greek heritage, but I, was born with boy equipment, so I don't know what I'm going to do here." And of course, we need about 30 tribes to try and really be comprehensive. It just felt kind of weird when you were saying, well, what about like North Africa? I guess you can just lump them into the Uktena, or otherwise have them join a tribe on philosophical purposes. So in order to get smaller tribes, a fewer number of tribes, we kind of had to go to the entirely philosophical basis, which was, some things were lost, but I think it was probably the right move for what we were going for.
I think you were next.
Yeah. Chicago. Is Chicago a vision of how cross-venue should be handled in the World of Darkness, or is it a venue of how cross-venue could be handled?
In my opinion, it's the latter. It's an example of this is one type of setting, one way to do it and stuff.
Yeah,
Use it as
definitely.
a guide if you want to.
Definitely, I can't think of any books we've put out this with the idea of this is how it should be.
Right.
Everything we've developed for New World of Darkness has really been the idea of this is one possibility.
Should is a kind of bad word to us.
Yeah.
We would like to present strong arguments for why this is good, why this is preferable, why you would want horror in the World of Darkness, for instance, instead of having it be,
Buffy.
completely Saturday morning cartoon, or Buffy, yes, very Whedon-esque. But although we make those suggestions and we try to argue for why, the burden of proof is on us. So we'd rather show you why you can get positive results by doing what we're trying here, rather than tell you not to do what we aren't laying out.
Right. And one of the reasons we used to all those by nights and Rage Across books and stuff was to show you how different places can be different and stuff. So you have a wide range so that your particular place, do pull whatever ideas you want to on that. And of course, another idea was, well, we had a schedule to fill, and these are good books to do. But that was one of the main reasons. It just showed the diversity of stuff.
We'll be editing that part out later. I'm going to actually interject a question here real quick. For Mage, for both the guys that have developed live action stuff, Mage for a long time was always viewed as an unplayable game in a live action format. And now it's very, very popular.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, for a long time, Werewolf was really the number two. And to some degree, I'd say Mage has kind of switched places with it in a live art format. And what was the initial challenge to overcome, and how did you guys do it?
Jess, I just want to interject here. I remember feeling like an idiot because I told people that you said it would never happen. We were not going to do it.
Interestingly, the original impetus for not doing a Mage live action, I think, well, it mostly came out of the fact that I think that it was a headache that Rich Dansky really didn't want to tackle early on when he was doing a lot of Mind's Eye stuff, and I apologize for putting you on the plate in absentia, Rich.
But no, I remember on the internet during that time, there was lots of different fan interpretations of how live action was, and they were all wildly different.
The big argument, and I didn't have anything to do with this, but I was certainly present for enough of the arguments around the audience where they said, because you can't have one storyteller per player, following them around and making a judgment on whether this is legitimate casting or not.
Yeah.
Because magic is subject to that kind of interpretation instead of coming in neat little lists like disciplines. That's why it is what it is.
Also, too many hand signs to come up with.
I'm in this dimension, I'm in that dimension, over here, over there.
I know Kung Fu.
What became clear to me, though, that Eddie hinted at, is that there were plenty of people who were playing Mage live action who had found ways to make it work for their group and who had decided they were going to do it and that they had implemented a system that they liked and that they were using. So clearly it could be done. And one of the other big realizations that came hand in hand with that was that even though Mage relied on a lot of interpretation for its rules, we trusted players all the time to do things on the level and to interpret things for themselves. We trusted players to keep track of their own blood points in Vampire and to know how the disciplines of various unusual bloodlines worked and to implement those correctly. We trusted players to make judgment calls about the rules all the time. Why couldn't we do that with Mage? So that's what informed my impetus for the original Mind's Eye Theater for Ascension, was the idea that if we put these tools into the hands of players, then we can trust them to try to make something cool out of it through suggestions, and we can also give them a wide range of tool sets. There were so many ways of playing Mage live action that were being experimented with. I wanted to put a bunch of different tools on the table and say, pick the ones that work best for your group. We're not going to dictate your play style to you. We're going to offer you support depending on how you think Mage should be played.
Right. And I know when I was first kicking around the initial design ideas for Mind's Eye Theater Awakening with Rich, my first kind of pitch was Rule 0 as magic system. The arbitration rules in the new Mind's Eye Theater system I thought were fantastic. The idea that before everything else, two players could sit down and decide for themselves, this is how this is going to work. And they say, okay, we agree this is how this comic comes out. And like, that pretty much is the Mage magic system at its core. Is whatever we all agree works. And so a lot of my basis came from that. But on the other hand, I also understood after having watched a lot of Mage live action games, both in the old Chronicle and some people trying to do it within a can with just the core books, is that there was a lot of things that were still unclear and vague. And so that's why in my system I moved much more towards a heavy emphasis on rotes. And the idea that rotes are much more efficient, much more useful, and much more structured in the live action system, because while you still have that creative ability available, you still have the ability to negotiate and do weird things, because I still firmly believe that magic should always be an art in however we interpret it, as opposed to a science. At the same time, having 300 plus pre-constructed spells which you whip out and say, this is how this works, and it works this way, because like system basis really speeds up a lot of the conflict and confusion during the course of the game. So while you definitely have to have a certain amount of trust in the players during a live action game, not needing that trust for every time you use magic certainly speeds things along, allows players to focus on what they think is cool about the game and not what they think how the system should work.
All right. You. Speak up.
One of the things, speaking of Mage, actually, one of the things that I noticed with the new system was there was a very large focus on conciliable politics and the sort of notion that magical resources were scarce and that mages were kind of their own worst enemy. And I found personally that it ups the stakes for and the effectiveness of a LARP, because it suggests that there's a deep political game there.
Oh, excellent, good.
But one of the things that I wonder about is, do you think that notion of Mage as a political game is something that does come across, or is it, from what you've seen from players, is something that they're willing to embrace?
Are you talking about specifically in LARP?
Yeah, mainly in LARP.
Yes, in fact, I remember when the rules first came out, the two biggest things people freaked out about was, oh my god, Paradox hurts really bad, and oh my god, where did my mana go? And those were both intentional design decisions, because one thing I have found is that politics occur when you have scarce resources in every human society. And so for mages to have a reason to put up with each other's bullshit, you need to have politics, and you need to have a reason why they put up with each other, and scarce resources was the logical conclusion. So yeah, I did intentionally scale back the implication of how scarce mana is. I did intentionally make Paradox more painful, so that way people need to look at mana and other resources and using spells sparingly because they had to rely on each other as mages in order to be able to do that. So, and I have seen that borne out. I mean, once I kind of talked to, because I remember the first few months, it was going to Origins and a lot of CamCons, and the first ICC, it was a lot of me